Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm James, and this is Ewan, and we are from the UK. Apologies for the accents. Hopefully you can understand us. So we're going to tell you a bit about the contagious content work we've been doing. So about a year ago, we were asked by Kantar Media to spend a little bit of time thinking about social media, and actually to do that a bit differently from how we might normally do it. And specifically, that was about spending time not thinking like researchers. So we were trying to think like real, normal people would. So when we sat ourselves down in a room together and started to chat about social media, we realized very quickly that we weren't interested in ROI or metrics or big data or any of those kind of things. What we were actually interested in was content. Specifically, we started talking about cat videos. Now, I don't mind a cat, but I wouldn't say I was a massive cat fan, so that was quite interesting to me. Why is it that I find myself sharing cat videos online? So it seemed that there was more going on there than it simply being that cat videos are interesting, I'm sharing cat videos. There has to be something underlying that. So with that in mind, we started to put our researcher hats back on and started to think a bit more about what the attributes to content are likely to be that might make you want to share something. So first of all, we just sat around and we talked, and we said, well, what are the kind of things that we think we're looking at when we want to decide to share something? And then we very quickly turned to the world of academia. So we looked at some traditional established psychology and sociology theories, so things like tragedy of the commons, social currency, postmodernism. We also looked at some of the newer work in this area, so work from people like Jonah Berger, Duncan Watts, to try and understand what kind of attributes people might be looking for when they decide to share something. So I'm going to stop and smile now. This one's taking a photo. Okay, so having done that, we then went on and we decided, well, we've got a framework here. We kind of think we know what the attributes are. So we started doing some initial cognitive testing, and then we moved on from that to start looking at what was going viral at that moment in time and thinking about, well, does what we're looking at here really start to explain those things? So having come to our framework, we did an initial piece of beta testing. Okay, good. So the beta testing we did, about 6 months before this, there'd been a news story about an IKEA monkey. Hands up, everyone remember the IKEA monkey? Okay, good. So the IKEA monkey, this was a monkey that had gotten loose in an IKEA store in Toronto. So we took 4 newspaper headlines, we debranded them completely, and using the Lightspeed mobile panel, we were able to show these to 2,000 individuals, and we asked, well, so which of these 4 would you be most likely to share? And then a series of questions about the attributes based around our model as to what people saw in those stories. We were able to see that 2 of those headlines really came out on top, and they were for The Sun and the Mail Online. Now, they had some stuff in common. They were both really good at hitting emotion, so they were both seen as very humorous. But they also had some things that they didn't share in common. So, for example, the Mail Online was really good at being informative. So people read it, and they knew exactly what was going on in the story. But we could also see that within the Sun's headline, there was a real sense of that having brevity, so it was really punchy and really good. So we were able to see that the attributes that we were looking at were actually helping us to understand. So I've been talking about attributes and frameworks, so it's probably only right that I should show you at this point what that is. So what we've come to is a reach model. So we look at relevance, emotion, ambience, currency, and headlines. And we feel that these are kind of the underlying factors that sit within social content that drive people to make a decision to share. And we've been really lucky to start working with Yahoo now and start doing some alpha testing to actually show that these are the attributes and how they work. The great news is that from doing the survey work that we've done with Yahoo, so running overlay surveys on their website, we've been able to show that actually those attributes do help us show and explain how content gets shared and what those attributes are. So I'm now going to hand over to Ewan, who's going to tell you a bit more about each of these attributes and also a little bit more about what we've been finding out with Yahoo.
Thanks, James. Yes, we did validate our models. Otherwise, we wouldn't really be here. But starting off with our reach model, and starting with R, this relates to the relevance of the content. So how interesting is this content to the people who are sharing it and the people who effectively are going to be consuming it? Makes sense. The more relevant the content, the more interesting it is to you, then the more likely you are to share it. And there's various brands who do this really particularly well. A couple from the UK, like The Guardian and the BBC, have dedicated accounts for their sports content, music content, culture, whatever it may be. And NPR do this really particularly well over here in the States. On from the relevance, the next element we're looking at is the emotional side of the content. So what we're not necessarily talking about here is just make it a happy thing and then somebody's going to pick it up and pass it onwards. It's not necessarily the tone, but it's more the strength of emotion that's evoked from actually consuming this content. So content that gets people in a bit of a tiz, gets people really fired up, is much more likely to go viral than something that's a little bit middle of the road. And again, when we think of brands that are doing this particularly well in the UK, the Mail Online gets all lefties in a tiz all the time. And as I understand it, Fox News has a similar sort of role to play over here. The next element we're looking at is the ambience. So what we're talking about here is the context in which the content is being shared. And these things have been mentioned a few times today. So here we're looking at kind of how people will share it, how easy it is to share, and how well it taps into the current zeitgeist. So a great example of this was Orioles, who obviously they dunked in the dark in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago when the power went out, and really, really captured the zeitgeist at the time. And then the next element we're looking at is the social currency. And what effectively we're looking at here is kind of the level of kudos that people are getting when they share some content. And we're reasonably confident that we're the first ones to share this image today. So effectively, this is an exclusive. There is some social currency developed in here. And what we're looking at is effectively, well, actually, what are people going to think of you when you share this kind of content? And from this, you can start building up your identity, really. So this effectively is acting as a bit of a badge, and what we've got is that you can start telling that we're kids of the 90s who spend far too much time playing with silly GIFs online rather than doing hard work. And then the final element is the handiness factor. So how useful is the content? Does it have a utility value? Are you giving discounts or vouchers or useful information? If you are, then it's more likely to get picked up and passed onwards. So thinking back now to the work we've done with Yahoo, we wanted to share a little bit of the final results. And the first point we wanted to kind of demystify a little bit was where to start. If you're wanting your content to go viral, do you start with the content itself and making that great so people have to share it? Or do you want to start with the influencers, the individuals who are going to pass it on and kind of diffuse your message as quickly and widely as possible? And our model that we've created certainly points towards content first. In fact, only about 12% of what we can predict is hit up in the actual individuals themselves, with the rest being driven by the content which people are consuming. And then our factor regression analysis that we've done allows us to really look at the levels of importance of each of our factors. And what we've seen is that the social currency is twice as important as any other reason to share content. And we've seen that across 6 out of the 7 categories that we have tested. The one slight difference was in the area of celebrity gossip, where people don't necessarily want to wear the badge that says that they spend their lunch hour checking out what Justin Bieber's doing, what Kim Kardashian's wearing, or injecting into her bottom. And far less standing on the stage talking about it and admitting it. And then the final point that we talked about was the role that images and video play. And there's no doubt about it, images can certainly play a vital role in getting content to go viral. But they need to be really good. They need to be strong, and they need to be bold images to do that. And so what we're showing here is effectively a correlation between the rating of the images and the likelihood to share content. And what we see is that once the imagery is rated kind of 5, 6, or 7 out of 7, you're seeing a real impact in the likelihood to share the content onwards. I'll pass back to James, who shall wrap things up.
Okay, thanks, Ewan. So in summary then, think reach. When you're thinking about your content, think about which attributes that content's going to hit. So is it going to be relevant, emotional, ambience, currency, or handiness? And think, is it hitting it strong enough for someone actually to make a decision to start sharing things? And remember, think content first. There's no point in reaching great influencers if you're not going to give them great content that they're going to want to share. Offer people social currency. As Ewan was saying, people are effectively badging themselves with the content that they put out there and what they're sharing. So give them a reason to want to associate themselves with the content that you're putting out. Remember that guilty pleasures can sometimes work a bit differently. If it is something that's going to be embarrassing, potentially for some individuals, then you need to think a bit more about which individuals are actually going to be willing to share that kind of thing. The use of bold imagery is great, but if you're not going to use high-quality images, then you may as well just leave them out, because they're not necessarily going to help you drive sharing anymore. And finally, of course, if in doubt, make sure you put a monkey in it. Okay? Thank you very much.